This podcast is brought to you by Mapper Forward's new Patreon community, the Global Coffee Think Tank. Check the show notes or head to patreon.com/mapperforward to find out how you can become a member today. Welcome back to the Daily Coffee Pro by Mapper Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and I am joined by Veronica Ponce. Welcome, Veronica.
Thank you, Lee.
We are talking about women in the coffee supply chain and how we can invest and empower in those women. And in the first two episodes, we spoke about the challenges that women are having in origin. And in the second episode, we spoke about the challenges that women are experiencing on the supply chain. On the consuming end of the supply chain.
Yeah.
Today, we want to talk about where investment is most needed to empower women and open up opportunities for them in the supply chain. Share your ideas with us on what that is.
So, it's a no-brainer at farm level. You need to, if you are searching for the best cup, if you are, trying to do traceability in your purchasing of coffee, it's a no-brainer that you should be investing on how, even just asking your supplier, how you can help, like what other gender equality initiatives they are already in place. Like we don't need to, you don't need to start something from scratch. So my suggestion as to how to empower women, like for example, at Origin, is programs for education. But when you launch a program for education, usually they don't involve women. And they
Hold on, tell me more about what you mean about that, because that's a very interesting point.
There is a lot of sustainability initiatives, but unfortunately, when they launch it into Origin at farms, they invite men because there is the assumption that men are the farmers, but they need to get more women involved in those training. They need to, if we would like to have productivity, we need to get more women involved in those trainings. So there are already systems in place, like from years, there has been, this amount of support and, to help farmers, in training, in productivity and in production.
Mm-hmm.
But we taking into account women in those trainings? Are we, giving them the opportunity to have access to those training? They're already in place there. They doesn't take nothing. But there is the challenge, the cultural barrier challenge, because in some countries you have to ask the husband, if they are allowed to come to the training, So we need to invest in more education for women. As we said, they lack of resources, education, financial stability. We need to make sure they have knowledge. So investing in education programs for women, I feel that it should be our priority.
I'm sorry to cut you off there. My brain is peaking with this thing that you're just saying. I find it very interesting that what you're saying is that we need to give women more access to education, but we're not involving women in the discussion around that. I do a lot of work in the Middle East. I have a lot of clients in the Middle East. And right now, particularly in Saudi Arabia, there's a very interesting shift in culture happening. And this is being echoed in the coffee industry in Saudi Arabia, unlike anywhere else in the world. What's happening is that there's a shift in the way that the society is approaching the workforce. So 4 years ago, women were not allowed to drive, they were not allowed to own businesses, and they were not allowed to work. Now, not only do they drive, not only do they work, but they also own businesses. And what has been very interesting to observe is that it's becoming really apparent that the reason that a lot of the men are not involving women in these discussions is because they simply don't know how to approach those conversations. They feel intimidated by approaching women and involving women in that discussion, and so the conversations aren't happening. So when I get involved and I coach both sides of the parties to have those conversations, what I have found is that the men are really open to inviting women into the discussion, because it turns out that both parties have felt that they were subjugated. Both parties felt that the men who knew that there were women out there that had solutions to problems weren't allowed to approach the women because the women were not allowed to be a part of the discussion. Yeah. And the men felt isolated from inviting the women into the discussion because that's how society had set it up. And it's interesting, right?
How societies, and it would differ in societies. Some societies, they are going to be very strong, and men are not going to allow women to sit on the table to have a discussion.
Right, but there are some men out there.
There are some men out there
want to invite women and do recognize, and I think it's an increasing number of men.
No, we are
right?
to I'm happy to celebrate those achievements, like it's good to mention them, but we need to also keep going, we need to
100%.
make sure that, we need to make sure
started.
that on those places that these culture barriers, they are still there, how to break through that, how to break through that stereotype that women should be involved. And, giving education to women, we said it is important, taking her into account in something that is already established, bringing another point of view to the table.
Yep.
Some men will feel like, no, I don't want to do that because I'll feel less, how my male colleagues are going to look, or how
100%.
my other male families are going to see if I invite my wife to make the decision making.
Look, even when in the cafe side of things, what you have is, I've experienced it many times, somebody in the cafe will bully one of the women. In my experience, it was me. And you look to the other men, because this person is obviously bullying me and I'm trying to stand up to this bully. And you look to the other men to stand up with you and just say, hey, bro, cut it out. Like, it's not okay to throw this woman up against a fridge. It's just not okay. They don't say anything because it wouldn't be, it's not cool to say something.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, they're afraid of the backlash. But then afterwards, they come up to you privately and say, you know what, that was so shit. What happened to you? I'm so sorry. That's the kind of shit that needs to stop happening. The way that we fix that is by investing in education for men as much as for women. Because teaching men how to treat women well.
We need to involve men. And that's why I said, like, when you give the training to men, you need to make sure you involve women too. So I'm 100%. Not saying...
Yeah. I'm with you, woman. I'm with you.
We need to be we are all together as part of the community. Yep. So we need to thrive, we need to support each other. And I get what you're saying in the cafe, how women get bullied, and sometimes I personally, I felt powerless when I couldn't say anything because you feel like I could lose my job. Many things could happen in your head as women, but if a man step up into another man, that's the culture that we need to start happening and going, that all the men stepping up for women, creating, men should be our allies in this, trying to change that culture.
And that's an important investment that needs to be made by men in this scenario, because one thing that we're definitely finding, and I could tell you many, many examples where one quick one was that there was an issue here in Australia of a community of people who felt that religiously they had the right to beat their wives. They felt that it was written into their religious text that they could do that. And a doctor had noticed that too many of the women were turning up in his doctor's surgery battered and bruised from domestic violence. So the doctor went to the head of this religious organization and said, if you don't stop doing this, the women in our community are all going to die. And so it wasn't until the head of that religious community, a man, turned around and said, I am outlawing domestic violence. this religious text, I'm obviously being very careful not to mention the religion, but this religious text states that it is criminal in our religion to lay a finger on a woman. In one day they stopped domestic violence in a community of tens of thousands of people. Why? Because a man stood up and said, this is not okay.
Yeah. And, you know, that's what we need. And it just starts by one person's action to change the culture and, you know, to start replicating it. And that men should start getting more involved about how to empower women. They definitely need to start investing in women, in how to help your women colleague, you know. It's a power dynamic again, you know. It's all about who wants to be in charge and power. But we need to understand that if we want to progress in the industry, we want to have a sustainable industry, we need to help each other. We need to, you know, empower each other if we want to, you know, give access to the younger generations, you know. This is, if we don't address these things right now, future generations are gonna lose that interest in the industry. They are not gonna see the industry as a place or as a career growth. They're gonna migrate to an industry that has, you know,
that's
better,
less hard.
Less hard, not too complicated, and, you know, or, you know, and something like for example, in Australia, the cafe jobs, you know, like a lot of baristas, they are casual. They are students. They see that as like a temporary job. And how do you change that culture of, you know, if there's someone that right now is working in a cafe and they would like to improve in coffee, or, you know, grow their career in coffee, they don't feel intimidated from staff. You know, they don't feel bullied from staff. It will be a hard way to get into, you know. So it's a sustainable issue at the end of the day.
I think you're right. And I think that it sounds like the investment, if we answer the question, where is the investment most needed to open up opportunities, the investment needs to be made into removing barriers for women.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, the issue isn't, are women smart enough, or are they hardworking enough, or are they intelligent enough, or do they have enough grit? Women have demonstrated their ability to do all of those things. It's just that there are barriers that give us access to do the things that we need to be able to progress and have the opportunities. And so the investment needs to be made in removing barriers. And the investment isn't just in money. The investment is in people showing up and saying, you know what, this woman is being prevented from being a coffee roaster because she can't lift 15 60-kilo bags in one day. Is that the best thing for my business? Is that the best thing of the way that I want to show up for staff and people who choose to work for me? Probably not. Probably not.
And, you know, and those barriers that we have spoken, you know, they are going to be hard to get down, but we need a collective effort. It has to come from
100%.
Different.
There's no going back.
From individuals, from, you know, the powerful players. They need to come on board to change those barriers, to tackle those barriers, change the culture. It cannot happen just one person cannot, you know. We can speak as women, but we need
everyone needs to be on board.
Everyone needs to come on board.
So in the next episode, Veronica, we're going to ask the question, how does the coffee industry benefit from women being empowered? Let's do that. Yeah. Okay. Peace, love, and peanut butter, everybody. Have an amazing rest of your day. Thanks, friends. If you enjoyed this video, here's what you should check out next. Consider supporting Map It Forward on Patreon and be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell before you leave.